Hello coders, this is Jared with Renaissance Coders, and in this video we are going to continue with our Cannon Blast Complete Game series in Unity 3D. Now in our last video we implemented the scoring system into our game, and in this video we are going to initially pull our game into Unity version 2017.1. Fairly recently we pulled our project into Unity version 5.6.2, and they actually just released version 2017.1 on Tuesday, July 11th. We will be creating a video to cover the updates made for version 2017.1 in depth, but for now let's pull our Cannon Blast project into this latest version of Unity 3D and see if we run into any issues. Okay, so I have actually gone through the installation process for 2017.1 already, so I'm just going to go ahead and try to open up my Cannon Blast game here, and I'm going to get a message here that says opening project in non-matching editor installation. So basically it just tells me this was opened in a previous version of Unity, so this may require a re-import. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually click on continue, and I'm expecting this to take a little while because the 2017.1 version actually brings a ton of new functionality into Unity. Okay, so as we can see here, it is actually doing a re-import. Okay, so it looks like it has started up. Our lighting has not built out yet, but that's okay. We'll give it a minute to do that. Okay, so it looks like it worked. We do have a couple of new warnings here. I get the metal warning every time I start up Unity, so that's okay. We're getting the same warning we were getting before regarding the camera, a couple of warnings regarding the standard assets, a couple of utility warnings. Okay, cool. So it doesn't look like we actually have any hard errors though. So let's go ahead and clear that out. I'm just going to zoom out really quickly, make sure our scene still looks good, and it does. Click on the cannon. The cannon still looks good. You know, our rotation is still correct on our cannon. Still looks really nice, polished. Smooth. Now let's go ahead and press play and make sure that this is actually still working. Okay, so I'm just going to rotate my cannon up here a little bit, increase my firepower, and fire. Okay, cool. So it looks like everything is still working. Okay, so it looks like we can easily pull this project into the new version of Unity, which is really cool. Now, as promised in our last video, we said that we would add in our follow camera for our cannonball. So let's do that in this video as well. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is add a new tag here because that's really quick and easy to do. So we're going to go up to our tags. We're going to add a tag, and we're going to add a tag for our cannonball. And now I'm actually going to go to my prefabs folder, click on my cannonball, and just tag it as a cannonball. And we're going to use this to actually have our follow camera look at or find our cannonball. Now the next thing we actually want to do is go to our assets scripts folder, because we're going to have to create a new script in this video, and we are going to have to update our game manager script as well. So let's just double click the game manager. We can drag this over, and let's go back to Unity really quickly, and we're just going to right click, create a C# script, and we can just very easily call this our follow camera. Now let's go ahead and open up this one as well. Okay, so I'm actually going to get started inside of my game manager script here. We're just going to add a couple of new functions and add some new variables. So let's get started with the variables. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new public camera, and I'm going to call this one my Cannon Cam. I'm going to create another public camera that I can just call my Cannonball Cam. And finally, I'm going to create a public camera follow. Follow camera, like the script we just created. And we can just call this our follow camera. Okay, now that we have those variables set up, what we want to do is actually create a start function again. Now, we removed it in the last video, but I did say that we would probably have to add it back. So we're going to go ahead and add that back now. We're going to just very easily say void start. And inside of our start function, then we want to set our cannonball cam.enabled equal to false here. We don't want two cameras running at the same time, so we're just going to immediately turn off our cannonball camera because we don't need it until we have a cannonball being fired in the scene. Now that we have that done, we're going to create a couple of functions here. We could do most of this logic in a single function, but I'm going to break it apart so that way we really understand exactly what's going on here within these functions. So the first one we're going to create is going to be a public void, and we can just very easily call this change to cannonball. So basically what this is going to do is change from our Cannon camera to our cannonball camera. So of course the first thing that we want to do here is set our cannonball cam.enabled equal to true, and we actually have to get a reference to our follow camera script here. So what we can do is set our follow camera equal to our cannonball cam.get component, and the type of component that we want to get is going to be follow camera. Okay, now that we've got that reference set up, we are actually going to need to set up a target for our Cannonball camera to follow as well. And we haven't set up the reference in our follow camera script yet, but we will do that once we create that script. But for now, let's just say that our follow camera dot target is going to be equal to a game object dot find game object with tag, and the tag we're going to use here is going to be Cannonball. And we actually want the transform, not the game object here. So we can just pass in our transform. And so now we've got our target set up, and the last thing that we actually need to do is say that our CannonCam dot enabled is going to be equal to false. Okay, and that should be everything that we need to do inside of this function. The next thing that we actually want to do is create another function here to actually change back to our Canon camera. So let's go underneath our change to Cannonball and just create a public void, and we can just change to Canon here. And what we want to do here is say that our CannonCam dot enabled is going to be set equal to true, and our CannonBallCam dot enabled is going to be set equal to false. And that should be all we need for this function as well. You know, it's very simple, very easy. We do want to create one final function here, and that's going to actually reset the position of our follow camera. So let's go underneath our change to Canon, and we're just going to create another public void, and we can just very easily call this reset Cannonball cam. And all we have to do here is just very simply update the position of our Cannonball camera. Since it's going to be disabled, we won't see any crazy jitter or anything. We can just hard code the position. So what we can do here is say that our Cannonball cam dot transform dot position is going to be equal to our follow camera reference dot initial position. Now, the other thing that we can actually do here is go up to this function, just copy it, and we can actually paste it into our change to Canon function. So this way we don't have to remember to actually call this later. Anytime we change to Canon, we just immediately reset that Cannonball camera's position to the initial position. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's go back out to our scene. We may have some issues here. We do, and that's because we haven't actually written out our follow camera script yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, we are going to need several variables up top here. So let's go ahead and create those. We're going to need a public transform for our target. We're going to need a public float for our distance to maintain. We can set this to 10.0f. Let's set a height, so a public float for the height we want to maintain. Set this to like a value of 5. Now we want to create some damping variables that we can use, so we're going to create a public float for our height damping. Let's just set this equal to like 2, and we're going to create another public float for our rotation damping. Set this to a value of like 3. Okay, and we are also going to need a initial position. This also needs to be public, so we're going to say public vector 3 initial position. Very cool. Now inside of our start function, you may have already guessed what we need to do. We need to set up our initial position. So basically what this will allow us to do is put our follow camera anywhere in the scene, and once we start the scene, it will know where its initial position is, so that's where it needs to move back to. So let's go ahead and just say that our initial position is equal to our transform, lowercase t, transform dot position. Okay, now what we actually want to do is change our update function to a fixed update function. For the sake of time, I don't want to cover what fixed update actually does versus update, but again, if you're interested, just drop a comment below and we'll be sure to cover that in another video. Now, the first thing that we actually want to do here is say that if we don't have a target, then we're just going to quickly return. Now, after this, what we want to do is create a couple of new float values. So we're going to create float wanted rotation angle, set that equal to a target.EulerAngles.y, and we also want to create a float wanted height. We can set that this equal to a target.position.y plus our height. Basically what this is going to do is it gets the wanted rotation for our camera. So this is just sort of trying to figure out what rotation do I actually want and what height do I actually want. Now what we actually want to do is figure out what our current rotation and current height is. So we can create a float for our current rotation angle, set that equal to our transform.EulerAngles.y, and we want to create a final float here for our current height, and we can set that equal to our transform.position.y. Y. Basically, all this is doing is getting a couple of float values that we're going to actually need in order to get our camera moving and following like we want it to. So now what we actually want to do is first update the rotation of our camera. So we're going to say that our current rotation angle is going to be equal to a mathf.lerp angle. We're going to pass in our current rotation angle, our wanted rotation angle, and our rotation dampening multiplied by time.delta time. Okay, and that's just going to allow us to damp the rotation around the y-axis for our camera. And now we actually want to damp the height as well, so we're just going to say that our current height is going to be equal to a mathf.lerp, and we're going to lerp between our current height, our wanted height, and our height dampening multiplied by time.delta time. And again, this is just going to allow us to damp the height and make sure that we're following at a pretty good height away from our cannonball. Now what we actually want to do is convert the angle that we have into an actual rotation. So we can just create a var here and say that our var current rotation is going to be equal to a quaternion dot Euler. And for this, we're going to pass in a value of 0 for the x, our current rotation angle for the y, and a 0 in the z. The next thing that we actually want to do is update the position of our camera on the x and z plane to a set distance behind our target. So let's go ahead and do that now. All we have to do is say that our transform.position is equal to our target dot position. So we're going to immediately move to our target's position, and then we're going to say that our transform dot position minus equals our current rotation multiplied by vector 3 dot forward. Forward is a direction, multiplied by our distance, so how far we should stay away from the cannonball. And now we actually want to update the height as well, so we can just create another transform.position update, and we're going to set this equal to a new vector 3. We're going to pass in our transform.position.x, our current height, and our transform.position.z. Okay, very cool. Now the last thing that we actually need to do is really simple. We want to actually look at our target, so we're just going to say that our transform dot look at, and we're going to look at the target here. Okay, cool. So that script is a little in-depth. If you haven't worked with cameras before, they can be really tricky, but hopefully a lot of this makes sense. If some of it doesn't make sense, definitely let us know in the comments below and we can dive a little deeper into this. But for right now, let's actually go back out to our scene and set some of this up. So let's go back out to our scene now. As we can see, the issues that we had before are now gone, which is awesome. And what we want to do is actually create a new camera first. So I'm going to go to Game Object, Camera, and I actually want to put this in a pretty good position so that when it starts off, it sort of follows the cannonball as it launches. So I'm going to just move it back and up. Actually, let's zero it out on the X. The Y, let's go with like 5. And on the Z, -30 seems to be a little close, so let's move it a little farther back here. Now, what I also want to do here is change the name of this to my Cannonball Cam. I'm doing that because we want to be sure and know exactly what this camera is, because if you have a lot of cameras inside of your scene, it can get really confusing really quickly. So let's go ahead and actually add our follow camera script onto here. So I'll just drag it and drop it. And as you can see, we don't actually have a target set up now, but that's okay because remember, we are going to be getting our target from our game manager script. That script actually says, okay, find game object with tag of cannonball. So let's actually go ahead and disable this now. We don't need it enabled initially. And let's go to our game manager because we do have to set up a few of our references here. We're going to need a reference for our Canon camera. So that's just going to actually be our main camera. We are going to need a reference for our Cannonball camera, and we don't actually need a public reference for our follow cam here. Let's actually remove the public reference. Now let's go ahead and save it, go back out, make sure that didn't cause any issues. I don't think it'll cause any issues. We don't actually need that public reference there though. Okay, so before we can actually test this, we have to do one more thing, right? So right now, if I were to actually go in and fire my cannon, then nothing's going to happen. You know, all of those updates we just made would be in vain because we're never calling the change to Cannonball. So what we want to do is actually go into our Canon controller, and inside of our Canon controller, we don't have a reference for our game manager yet. So we can easily set that up though. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're just gonna go ahead and create a private game manager, and we can just call this, let's just call it GM. I know in the Cannonball script I called it game manager, but that seems to get a little bit redundant. And actually, let's go ahead and open up the Cannonball script as well, just because I want to show you guys how we're going to be getting this. So if we look at the Cannonball script, we can see that we're creating a private game manager here, and then we're just using our start function to actually find object of type, and we're going to do the exact same thing here. So let's just copy it from our Cannonball, and we can just, inside of our start function here, we can just paste it. Okay, very cool. Well, okay, we do have to change this here. Make sure you change the variable name. If you don't change that, it won't work. Now, down inside of our fire cannon, again, what we want to do is actually say gm.change to cannonball. Name that the same thing, copy it. Let's go to our game manager and just paste it. Yep, okay, looks like it was named the same thing. Awesome. Now we should be able to actually save this. Let's go back out to our scene here, and now we should actually be able to test it. Okay, now what I'm gonna do here is just aim my cannon like way up here, because I want to have plenty of follow time, and I'm going to actually just drastically increase my firepower, and now fire. Okay. Initially, we have an issue. I can see that I've got pretty typical error from Unity. Object reference is not set to an instance of an object. So let's go check this out. Our follow camera.target. Let's go to our cannon controller here, and let's actually change up the way we're calling this. We're gonna delete it from there, and we're going to actually call that function after we've done everything else. So this should instantiate the Cannonball copy first, and then call that function. So let's try it now. Sort of an order of operations thing, I'm thinking. I think that's the issue anyways. So let's go ahead, increase our firepower, and fire. All right, so I knew this was gonna happen. So basically what's happening right now is that it's telling us that no cameras are actually rendering at the moment. So if I click on my Cannonball camera, we can see that it is disabled. If I click on my main camera, we can see that it is disabled. Again, I knew this was going to happen, and I did this on purpose just to try and throw you a little bit of a teaching point here. Okay, so what you may be noticing is that on our main camera, we're disabling the camera, but on our Cannonball camera, we've got the entire object actually disabled. So let's go ahead and stop this. We're going to go ahead and enable this. And remember that we're actually setting this to disabled at the very beginning. So now let's go ahead and try it one more time. Again, that's just sort of an issue that you can run into quite often. And actually, yeah, I should go ahead and remove that as well. But let's go ahead and test it really quickly to make sure it actually works. And fire. Okay, so obviously our follow camera script is working. It's following our cannon until it actually reaches the end. Now, one thing that is not happening is that we are not actually calling our change to cannon cam. Again, this is something that can easily happen. Basically, we forgot to call our change to cannon cam when the cannonball gets destroyed. So let's go back out to our Cannonball script here, and we want to go to Cannonball because that contains our Cannonball destroy here. And now what we actually want to do is we already have a reference for our game manager, and I'm going to go ahead and actually change this to GM as well. Just seems like best practice to have it named the same thing across all your scripts. So let's do it that way. Here we go. GM, GM, GM. But you don't have to do that. If you're fine with the way it's named for your scripts, then you can certainly leave it that way. Now, what we actually want to do here is inside of our Cannonball destroy function, after we instantiate our explosion, then we want to actually call our gm.change to cannon function. And again, let's go ahead and copy it, go to our game manager, just click, paste. Okay, looks like it was named the correct thing to begin with. Very cool. Now let's go back out to our scene. So the other thing I actually want to do is actually remove my audio listener from my Cannonball camera. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn that off. Actually, let's just go ahead and remove it. We don't need it. Boom, get rid of it. Okay, now let's clear the current errors. Let's press play here. Let's rotate our cannon up a little bit. And this time I'm actually going to try and hit the platform. So boom. Okay, so that obviously didn't hit here. And we've got a little bit of a crazy rotation happening there. Okay, coders, so let's go back out to our script now, and let's just take one more good look over this to see what's going on. So we're getting our wanted rotation angle and wanted height. That looks good. We're getting our current rotation angle and current height. That looks good. We're setting our current rotation angle equal to mathf.lerp angle. So that looks good. Current height, lerping, that looks pretty good. And we're just updating our rotation. Okay, transform position. Oh my god. I just found the issue. Okay, coders, here's the issue. We're throwing in a quaternion here. Okay, so that will not work. I don't know why I added that. Sorry about that, guys. That's definitely my bad. Let's remove that. And now let's go ahead and save it. And let's go test it again. So I'm just going to press play here. And we can update our firepower, update our angle, fire. Okay, very cool. So we're no longer running into that issue. Okay, coders, this video has definitely gone a little bit longer than I was hoping, but that's okay. That means there's a lot of content in here for you coders to actually cover and update into our game. Now, our game is actually starting to come together pretty well now. We've got some cooler effects going on. The cannonball's actually being followed and things like that, which makes it much cooler, but we still have several aspects of functionality that I want to add in. So in our next video, we are actually going to update the way we are firing and increasing the firepower of our cannon. I want to provide you coders with as many ways to do this as I can possibly think of. Of course, we were going to move on to update some scenes and add in some more levels and do a few more things like that, but I do want to update this before we get into that, because the scene design and things like that is, it becomes a lot easier once we get to that point. Definitely be sure to check that next tutorial out, and I look forward to seeing all of you coders in that next tutorial as well. Okay, coders, I hope that you enjoyed that video. We are constantly adding new videos here on YouTube. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It allows us to continue making great content for you coders. And if you are feeling extremely generous, please check out our Patreon account. Here are a few of our other tutorials just in case you want to keep on learning. If you become a patron of Renaissance Coders, you can get access to our source code and our project files as well. Okay, coders, that's going to do it for this video. As always, thanks for watching.